That's the big old bell at Eiheiji, Soto Zen Monastery in Japan, welcoming you to another Cuke Audio phone chat. This one today with Vanja Palmers, and you'll learn all about him if you don't know very soon. We call him up at 21 minutes and 30 seconds. I'm DC, Poobah of Cuke Audio and Cuke Archives, preserving the legacy of Shunryu Suzuki and those whose paths crossed his, and anything else that comes to mind. Speaking to you here from Sleepy Sanur with Dogat Bandita and Feline Gujita, but without lovely dear Katrinka, who we hope will be here next month. I pray that you and yours are safe and comfortable and can get out and do whatever you want within the limitations of the universal precept of do as little harm as possible. Before we go any further, let's pause to meditate. So when you hear the bell, hit pause. Meditate for as long as you like, or not. And if you don't hit pause, you'll have a mini meditation, M-I-N-I, meditation. You'll have a nano meditation, or a nano non-meditation. I don't know what the difference is really. And when you're through, hit unpause, and we'll be here waiting to hit the bell to end Zazen meditation, TM, or whatever it is you do. Well, that was certainly refreshing. So I met Vanja Palmers first back in 1973. I think when I was living at Green Gulch Farm, and just have seen him through the years, and I don't remember exactly what, but he's reminded me of a lot of it in this quite interesting talk. He's done a lot of really interesting and very noble things. At one point he talks about Kobun Chino. I saw both of them at Richard Baker's wedding to Marie Louise von Baden at Baker's Johanneshof retreat in the Black Forest of Germany. And I think that might have been 1999, the year Crooked Cucumber came out. Yeah. And Oh, that was an interesting event. Jerry Brown came, Sim Vandren, an old friend who is an architect who'd helped Zen Center a lot and was state architect under Brown, and various dear friends, and that was great. I was there for a few weeks, and when it was that event was over, I took a little trip over to Switzerland, and one of the things I did in Switzerland was to visit Vanja in Lucerne and see Felsentor, which he'll talk about, his retreat way up in the Alps above Lake Lucerne. They call it Lucerne, Luzern, and we say Lucerne, Lucern. Correction, please add an E at the end of those two, at the end of Lucerne and Lucerne. Lucerne, Luzerne. So I was visiting with him and Kobun at Vanya's house in Lucerne. There were a lot of people staying there, and there was a lot happening. And we were just sitting in the kitchen, talking and sharing refreshments. I remember telling them how shocked I was to see a cannabis store back then in town, and it was very strange. I mean, they had all this stuff made out of hashish and none of it to smoke, and they had pillows stuffed with marijuana. And the woman there told me that or they told me, I learned, she must have told me because it was too weird, that the Supreme Court of Switzerland had ruled that it was only illegal to ingest cannabis, but not to have it. So they were selling, I don't know, things made out of like hashish that you could buy them. I don't know. I can't remember what. Like a little decorative thing to put on a table. Of course, you could just go home and smoke it. The pillows, though, she said, were being bought by older people because they found it helped them sleep. And I tell you what, I sure found that out too. Now, if you're a heavy pot smoker, I think it can lead to insomnia. But if you're not, then marijuana is the best sleeping pill, is what I found. And Robert S. Durop wrote about that. It's not a pill. Sleeping aid. Robert S. Durop wrote about that in his book, Drugs in the Mind, which came out a long time ago, like in the early 60s. 1961, I just looked it up. Wow. So I read it a long time ago. But anyway, in it, he said marijuana was far better than sleeping pills. In it, he said that sleeping pills, the barbiturates, which 61, they were still legal and being prescribed by doctors. They were really dangerous. Man, they were heavy drugs, and getting addicted to one of those barbiturates was worse than heroin. It had you could die cold turkeying off of them. You really needed help and come off gradually off of a heavy addiction to barbiturates. Anyway, he said barbiturates just brought you below waking, not into deep sleep, marijuana help guide you into deep sleep. Now, maybe subsequent studies have shown that's not true, but I found it to be true as long as you weren't smoking all the time or stuff. I don't know. I never smoked all the time, but wow, did I find that was a great sleeping aid. Anyway, all right. So, old folks in Switzerland were discovering that. Here, I'd like to report I haven't had any cannabis since February 9th, 2005, my birthday. And it wasn't a big resolution or anything. I just thought, nah, it's just another habit. And I just never had any again. And after a while, I didn't want to break the spell because I'd quit drinking recently. And that's the way I look at quitting things you really don't want to do. I learned it with smoking. That's the really serious one in terms of don't mess with it. Well, drinking can be the same if you ever have a problem with it. But cigarettes, I swear, how many people haven't had a cigarette for a year, 2 years, 5 years? And they think, oh, I'll just try one puff. And then bang, they're addicted again. They're back on it. It's amazing. Things takes over your brain. So anyway, I was telling them about that store. And then, oh wait, I must tell you one other thing I just remembered about barbiturates. There was this guy named Ronnie Brecker that I met in Mexico when I was living there. I moved there when I was like 19, and went down and I met him because we were both students at the University of the Americas in Mexico City. But mainly we were just interested in smoking pot. And really, God, there was so much I could have learned back there. But, I was getting turned on to pot, and that was a whole new world. And so anyway, so I ended up following him and Ronnie Brecker and Kenny and some of my Missoula friends to San Francisco. They said, "Hey, that's where it's happening," and that was 65. They were talking about that, and so I went out to San Francisco in '66 in the spring and joined with them, and I was staying with them until I got involved with the Zen Center in the late summer, early fall. But once Ronnie told me that his mother was complaining that, she couldn't sleep at night and she was, really sleepy all day. And she went to the doctor and she asked, what's the problem? This is terrible. And so he talked to her about her medication and what she was taking. She was taking, pardon me, Mrs. Brecker. she was just going to sleep at night and taking Dexedrine. Which is speed. And then waking up in the morning and taking a barbiturate. Oh, neither of which a doctor should be prescribing. Oh my God, those are both yucky drugs. I had more of the speed type, very little barbiturates. I never liked downers. So for real this time, back to Vanya said, let's go to Oktoberfest. And so he got on the phone. That guy's got some connections. I mean, Munich, which they call München, it was, jam-packed full. But he got his reservations at the King's Hotel next to King's Park, I think. I don't know. I might have the names wrong, but that's how I remember it. A long time ago. And then we zipped over to Germany from Lucerne. And I remember, people say you can, when you're in Germany, you can get on the Autobahn, you can drive any speed you want and all that. There are areas where you can do that, but you got to know where they are, when they begin, when they end, and the tickets there are astounding. I think the tickets in Switzerland are even more. And they get you automatically with little cameras planted in the divider. So we were driving along there, and there was a flash, and Vanya went, "Oop, got a ticket." I remember that. So we arrived at the King's Hotel, if that's what it was indeed called, and each of us had a nice room, and it was a very nice place. And we went to the Oktoberfest, and we joined his brother in the wine tent. And his brother had a whole area there for his friends and stuff. And, there was a polka band playing, absolute worst music on earth. My God. Well, I don't know. There's some others that can vie with it, really. Pardon me. I hope I'm not offending anybody. Actually, I used to listen to Lawrence Welk, even in my adult years, because I admired him so much for doing perfectly what he did. I mean, he had the longest running band in America or something, at least on TV. It was the squarest possible show you can imagine. And there was a lot of polka and just real cornball, hokey stuff, but he did it all perfectly. He was a real perfectionist. And I admired him. I admire people that do what they do well, even if it's not my favorite thing. But at least to, pick up on it now and then. That was a long time ago. I don't know. His show stopped running. I mean, it was running in the 50s when I was a kid. And it stopped running somewhere around 1980. I don't know. I can't remember. Anyway, so I remember at one point, that they had these giant carafes, mugs of beer, Steins beer. And I can't drink a lot of beer. I haven't had a drink in 16 and a half years. And, if it'd been hard liquor or wine, I know we were in the wine tent, but we were drinking beer. And most people were. I don't know what that meant, really. I guess you had more wine options there. But I drank one of those, and I think each of us drank one. I mean, it was giant. And I remember at one point, Kobun was on the table dancing with as I remember it, and maybe my memory has decorated it, but dancing with a sort of traditionally dressed German woman. I mean, I see pigtails and a traditional old dress. Anyway, maybe she worked there. Maybe she was a waitress. Yeah, maybe something like that. Or maybe she was there just to do that. But they were on a table dancing. That was great. And then we didn't stay forever. We stayed a couple hours. And then we went over to the amusement area and rode a roller coaster with 5 loops. That was the trip. I always loved roller coasters. I always rode a roller coaster when I could, up to the time when I was about, 60. And now I don't want to get on them. I don't know. When I think about it, God, I loved roller coasters. I didn't like things that went around. I like things like roller coasters that went up and down and up and down. And, forward motion. Yeah, wow. I saw a whole documentary on great roller coasters on the airplane flying back on that trip. And that was a nice way to cap it off. And making great roller coasters is an art. They're scary as heck. My gosh. And I rode a little off subject here. That never stops me. Uh, I think the scariest one I rode in some ways was an old one. Where was that? Knott's Berry Farm had this big old wooden roller coaster. It was so cool, and it was rough. And that was, oh wow, maybe around 20 years ago. I rode that with Clay. We were down there. We went to Disneyland and we went to Knott's Berry Farm, and wow, that was fun. All right. So I guess it's time to give Vanya a call, huh? That's enough from me. Let's hear from him.
Hello, David.
Hi, Vanya. How you doing?
All right.
I want to hear your story for a podcast. And all right.
What kind of a story do you want to hear?
It won't be any trouble. Well, how about um, your way-seeking mind story, your work with animals?
I have been named the most dangerous man of Switzerland in the most prestigious Swiss, like the New York Times, like the Swiss, it's the Neue Zürcher Zeitung, which is the most conservative paper. I had a whole page, and the title was "The Most Dangerous Man of Switzerland." It was a funny and positive article taking reference to Timothy Leary, where Nixon called him the most dangerous man of America. So I was named the most dangerous man of Switzerland.
Oh, that is wonderful. Congratulations. See, that's exactly what we need to know about you. Yeah, I'm interested in knowing about your psychedelic work, about your work with animals, but I think it would be good to start with your way-seeking mind story.
Mm.
How your path has evolved, if you'd be so kind.
How long would you want to have this to be?
You can
5 minutes?
talk for forever.
Forever.
You talk all
I have a
day.
lunch. I have a lunch appointment with my brother.
Well, just
No, that's fine.
as long as you
Well,
wish.
well, shall I talk now?
Yeah. Um, uh, you were born in Austria, right?
I was born in Vienna, in
Yeah.
Austria, but that was right after World War II, and Vienna was occupied by the Russians, and Austria was mostly. And my father didn't see any future as a businessman, so we moved to Switzerland. I
Oh.
was less than 1 year old. I was still in the trolley,
Mm-hmm.
and they bought a little factory here, and they developed it. And so I grew up in Switzerland, and but my parents are Austrian, and with my parents I spoke Austrian, and the whole culture, of course, was Austrian. But I grew up in Switzerland, and that's where I stayed and went to school and went to university in Zurich. And
Where'd you go?
In Switzerland, it's in the central part of Switzerland where my parents moved to. It's a small village. There was a little factory called Kalida, which they then developed.
Mm-hmm.
And And I went to school in Sursee and in Lucerne, and then went to university in Zurich. And with my then girlfriend, later she became my wife and mother of our daughter. She was designing fashion, and we had a fashion boutique, a sort of a hippie fashion boutique.
What was it called?
And it was called Vanja Palmers, and that's where the name Vanja came. Or my given name was Johannes, or was Hans, which is in Russian. Little Hans is Vanja. So and Vanja is male and female, and this fashion boutique was male and female. We sort of picked the name Vanja, which then stuck with me till today. The boutique only existed a couple of years, but it was a meeting point for underground culture. Timothy Leary came in and out, went in and out there when he was in Switzerland, and we had one big changing room downstairs, and after we had the big water pipes in there and smoked, and in the weekend we would take acid and travel in there. That went on for a couple of years. And
what years was that?
We are now 69, 70, something like that, or 70, 71. And then I was really, like, my family was in business, and my brothers were all in business and textiles, and I was also geared to go that way. And then a friend of mine gave me we took together some LSD, and that totally blew my mind. And in some way very freeing, in some way very confusing. And right there in one of the very first or second LSD trip, I experienced myself as a sitting Buddha. I couldn't sit. I didn't know what a Buddha was. Far from being able to sit in a full lotus, I physically experienced myself sitting in a full lotus as a Buddha. And that was sort of interesting. And it was clear for me I lost interest in business, and then my beard grew, and my hair grew, and my clothes became long, and I became the clear classical, like hundreds, thousands of others of my generation, became a hippie, moved to the countryside, lived in commune, I stopped going to university. I didn't know what I wanted, but I knew I did not want that. I did not want to. I walked out of the business. It was a good business. I mean, we made good money, and I had over 30 employees. We Lorley, my wife, designed, and we produced the stuff, and we were, if we would have stuck with it, we would have been very good. But I was not interested anymore. And then I met Emela. She was at that time the pal of Tim Leary, and the two of us, in good friendship, also with Timothy, we moved on, and then with her I moved into an alpine hut and lived there for a year, way up in the mountains in Austria, where my family has a farm, and we lived up quite high up in the mountains, and for a year. And then her father had a heart attack in America. We flew to America, smuggled some hashish over, that was still possible then, in my shoes, and bought a motorcycle with it on the East Coast, bought a motorcycle with it, and then drove across the country, classical story. Took us several months, stayed in yoga, did a lot of yoga, stayed in yoga ashrams in Phoenix, Arizona, with the 3HO people, Yogi Bhajan, did a lot of yoga, and then drove all the way to the West Coast, and then from the south up to the north to Canada, from Mexico to Canada, all Highway 1, And on the way up, somebody suggested you should, if you meditate a lot, you should go to Tassajara. And
What year?
Tassajara, we knew
What year?
72.
Mm-hmm.
And we knew, 72 or 23. I'm confused. Maybe it's 73. When did Suzuki Roshi die?
71.
Well, then it was 72. It was just like the end of guest season. I remember it was like the closing day of guest season. So it was 72. And Suzuki Roshi had died 9 months before or something like that.
That's right. Exactly right. He died in December, and the end of guest seasons in January. And in September. In September.
Uh-huh. So we stayed there only for 3 days, and then they closed, and we had to leave. But I was obviously we got hooked in some way.
Yeah.
And then drove up to Canada and came back to San Francisco and started sitting at the Zen Center at the Page Street.
Yeah.
For about 6 months, every day go to Page Street, did sesshin there, rent a room nearby, and then moved out to Green Gulch.
To where?
And then Green Gulch.
Uh-huh. What year?
Well, now we are in three or even 4. No,
Because in 73, I was at Green Gulch. I certainly remember you there and Imola there, but I don't remember the details. In 72, I was in the city after having lived at Tassajara up to then. 73, I was at Green Gulch.
Green Gulch is 73 or 74 that we moved there. And then we stayed a couple of years. Imola stayed longer, and I moved to Tassajara. And then...
What year did you move to Tassajara?
I moved to Tassajara in 75 or 6.
Well, I was there 74, 75.
Well, I remember you around. I remember,
I remember you too. I just can't remember where, when specifically or anything. Of course, I remember you very well. At that point,
I still had a long beard and braided long hair, and that I only cut off then at some point in Tassajara. I forgot when. And then I stayed in Tassajara for 5 years, and became the director and did Trousseau and did was even Tanto there, and then at some point I got back together with my old girlfriend Lorley, who I was separated for many years, and she got pregnant, and then finally she wanted to move back to Switzerland, which we did. First, I moved back to Green Gulch for a while, a little bit, bought the house from Paul Hawken. No, bought the house from somebody and sold it to Paul Hawken.
Yeah, I remember going there.
And then I went back to Switzerland, and then had to find a place for the family, and then at that time I was already quite involved with Brother David, and we did a lot of traveling and then lecturing around the globe. I was always assisting him and then traveling with him, and then we started together this Buddhist Christian House of Silence, Purek, in Salzburg, or near Salzburg in the mountains. And that's now over 30 years ago. We started it in 1989. That was the opening.
That's your retreat in Austria, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And at that time, I got to get actually with Kobun. Remember, Kobun I really only met after I already moved back to Switzerland.
Oh, is that right? Huh.
Yeah, and we sort of met immediately, instantaneously, and from that point on, he came to Austria every year twice to do sesshin at Purek.
Mm-hmm.
I invited him over to Europe, and so we did that, and then at some point we lived in Austria. At some point we moved back to Switzerland. My wife is Swiss, and she wanted our daughter to go to school in Switzerland. So we moved back to Switzerland, to Lucerne. And having a restless mind and nothing else to do, I started another center, the Felsentor.
Yeah.
And that's Kobun was still here, and we did a one-day sitting with him in Felsentor while it still was being remodeled. And on our way to poor Exeschine, and then he and his daughter drowned in my place in Engelberg, where they were staying, the family, Katrine and the 3 kids, and Kobun was staying there, and Kobun and Maya, his 5-year-old girl, drowned there. So, and then, I became his successor and had, there were other long-term students around, and that was, again, influenced my life more than I realized at that point. And then animal rights is another thing, which this is sort of a not very coherent story, but while in Sahara, while living in Sahara, I got into this. I realized the horrors what we do with these other creatures living in this planet. I didn't even really consider. I was a vegetarian most of my life. My father was already a vegetarian, but I didn't realize how badly we treated these animals in laboratories, but mostly, or just by numbers, in agriculture. So being in Sahara with another guy called Bradley Miller, we started an initiative called the Buddhist Concern for Animals, and we sent this book from the animal rights books to all the Buddhist centers, and we published a little newspaper, Buddhist Concern for Animals, for a couple of years or so, but maybe 12 issues. Later on, we changed that to Humane Farming Association, which is still in existence and is a quite successful animal rights group with 300,000 members, and Bradley still is the president and runs it. And I came back to Europe and I started something similar, Alle Wesen, all beings, Buddhism and animal rights, and we did things, and that was an essential part of where my energy went for a long time now. And lately, the third thing that I've been involved is lately, being the last maybe 8 or 10 years, is psychedelics. After a total abstinence of 25 years, I didn't smoke anything or take anything, except maybe some green tea occasionally. I knew that I had to go back and look into it. It was so important in my life, and that I had to go back and look into it again and see if that is possibly something that I want to further investigate, or if that may be something helpful. For since I felt helpful to me, maybe it's helpful for others. And interesting enough, in my time in Zen Center, which is 10 years, we never talked about psychedelics. It was only later on that I realized that most everybody really had some experience. Almost most everybody had some experience with psychedelics, and not only some experience, but was sort of crucial. That experience was crucial for them to get there in first place.
That's right.
But we never talked about it.
We did. I'm maybe a earlier generation. Oh, sure.
Maybe so. In my time, it was a total taboo.
No, really?
I never, for me at least, for me.
Wow, that's interesting. There was one meeting back at Tas Sahara where Suzuki Roshi was in the city. Somebody said, we were just having a group meeting, and somebody said, I have a question. How many people in this room, there's about 60 students, how many people in this room have taken LSD or some psychedelic? And almost every hand raised.
Rose.
Yeah. Then how many people have taken it more than once? And then most hands raised. And kept going until how many have had, more than 100 trips? And there was only one person, Reb Anderson, who became the abbot of Zen Center.
No.
Yeah.
When I talked to Reb, and I have talked to him extensively, he told me that he had some experience, but not that extensive.
He told, I've heard, Reb was the last one. This is very interesting. Maybe he was downplaying it with you. He was the last one standing. Now, maybe it wasn't 100 trips, but before Reb came to Zen Center, he used to take LSD and sit zazen for meditate or whatever. He was meditating for hours by himself.
Okay.
That's very interesting. Okay. Well,
That's very interesting. Yeah, because I did several times talk to him about psychedelics because it's, it's what I'm doing now. I mean, I take very little myself, really, but I'm very involved in doing studies and all kinds of things.
Yeah.
I myself take hardly anything anymore at all, but but one of the things that I'm doing again is, for 5 years ago now, we did a traditional Zen sesshin, and did on the fourth day of sesshin, half of the people got psilocybin and half of them got placebo. And we they had to fill out a lot of questionnaires every day. And before the whole thing, they went into the tube, into the MRI. And after it, they went into the MRI. And it was a whole legal scientific study. And
Yeah. So come on, tell us what were the results?
Well, the results were good. I mean, it's published by now. It's all published, and obviously, there's people who got the real thing, were improved in their depth of meditation, and in the long that we made a 6-month follow-up. The lasting improvement of social interest or compassionate towards others, and involvement in community, and so forth. They all had a significantly better score.
Yeah.
Just a moment. Komm, Marina, ich bin am Telefon. But for me, my real interest was wanting to be able to do that legally, in itself. And the other one was the ideal participant was people who had long meditation practice with no psychedelic experience.
Yeah.
Now, we couldn't find 40 of those. About 20 of those we found. And we found that the other 20 had a lot of meditation experience and not very much psychedelic experience. So, but half of them were totally new. And my question to them was very simple, is that helpful? That's other experience that you have now. And what do you say about that? You have been sitting for 20 years. Is that helpful? Do you think you would like to recommend that to your students or friends? A lot of them teach already. That was my question.
Yeah.
And nobody had a negative experience. All of them said yes, to various degrees, and differentiated, and some were very impressed and some were mildly impressed, but everybody had a positive experience. Nobody got scared, nobody got confused.
Yeah.
And that's the difference to the Johns Hopkins studies, which is they do mystical experience studies. They are much bigger and have many more people doing that, and have a staff of 25 people. so forth.
Wow.
But they have done similar things, but they are not in a group session. They're individual. They're working towards that now, but they do individual, and they do it in a hospital setting. A nicely decorated room, but it's somewhere on the 6th floor, and you are in a hospital. And of course, when you are like on acid, as you know, or on psilocybin, that makes a difference.
Oh,
whether
yeah.
you are in a natural setting, in a space in the countryside, in a monastery, where there are bells and where there's the cowbells and then winds and birds, and you have been sitting for 3 days.
Yeah, I used to turn people on to LSD, and I had no bad experiences, and I would only do it under certain circumstances. One is that meditate and fast beforehand, no talking, an agreement of no talking, and if they start talking, me as the guide would gently remind them we have that agreement. It was never a problem. The other thing is in a natural setting. I mean, really natural. No human-made building visible. And I would turn people on who had mental problems and never had a problem. And using a clinical setting just seems, even in the clinical settings overall they have very positive experiences, but that to me that is not the way to do it.
Exactly.
Yeah, I've written 2 pieces that were published about psychedelics, although I haven't had any since '67. It's with a couple of very minor exceptions. But I wrote a piece for the book Zigzag Zen, and mainly I've ranted and railed against the war on drugs for many years in my websites and everything. That's just been a major, horrible persecution, and people who've taken psychedelics tend to have better integrated brains. They tend to be happier. I mean, it's ridiculous. It's horrible.
Yeah, totally ridiculous. Stephen Batchelor, in his latest book, comes out of the closet, and as a matter of fact, I initiated here a thing called Dharmawaska, where Buddhist people drink ayahuasca, and he participated in one of those sessions.
How did that go?
Good. He describes it in his book, actually, under, so that coded that nobody knows where it was and who it was. But he speaks about it. He speaks about it quite openly and frankly.
Good. Good. Now, and you knew Hoffman.
Yes, I knew Albert Hoffman for a long time, and I was able to spend the whole day with him not long before, a few weeks before he passed on at the age of 102. And that was a sort of really a crucial experience in my life. Right at that time, I mean, I knew him for a long time, but not really intimately, but, and then there was a big article in the Schweizer Illustrierte, which is sort of a family magazine, a good Swiss family magazine. And in the center page was a big picture of me sitting in the robes in the Zendo, in Paul Disco's Zendo at Felsentor, which is sort of Japanesey. And in big letters, it says, Buddha arrived on the Rigi. Rigi is the mountain here. And he had that sitting on his tiny table, Albert Hoffman had, and obviously he knew that I was going to come and visit, and somehow this was laying there, open, and for him, he was an old man by that time. I was representing Buddhism in some way, meditation, and he looked into my eyes deeply, and he said, "These sacred substances belong into the hand of meditation." And yeah,
Hmm.
it was sort of a strong memory for me to have that kind of. Which I believe is true. I'm a member of the SAPT, which is the Swiss Association of Psychedelic Doctors, MDs, and they took me in as a member, and I see them regularly. These are sort of my pals, and of course they are very interested in therapy, which is good, and that's the way people will. In the society, we can understand it as medicines that cure PTSD or cure depression and so forth. But ultimately, I'm convinced that that's all good. But ultimately, it's a sacred thing. It's something for healthy people to investigate the meaning of life.
Yes. Yes. Hmm. You called Steve Jobs up once, and
Hold on a second for just 1 second.
oh, sure.
Okay. Ich tue jetzt noch mal ganz kurz telefonieren, nur weil ich sage, der Lift hast du den nicht super gemacht. Nein, das.
Ui, ja, ich habe Staubsauger nur. Ja, dann kann ich das jetzt schnell machen.
Good. Okay, I'm here again.
Who was that?
Person who comes and helps me here, and I have to show something.
If it was Lorelei, I wanted you to say hello.
No.
You called up Steve Jobs once to see if he could help fund some research, psychedelic research.
Well, I didn't. I got a call from him when Kobun died.
Yes.
He wanted to know what happened. Then I hadn't had any contact with him anymore. And when I wrote a letter together with Albert Hoffman and then Rick Doblin brought the letter from Albert Hoffman and from me, and he went to talk to Steve.
Oh.
And Steve was interested, and he wanted more information and so forth. He never ended up giving us money.
Uh-huh.
But as far as I know, he obviously had experiences and called it one of the most important experiences in his life and so forth.
Yes.
He was one of the few who sort of publicly, in those days where it was really evil,
Uh-huh.
One of the few that stood to it, or
Yeah, stood up for it. Yeah, he was. Yeah. An interesting person. What do you know about his relationship with Kobun?
Not very much, because those was long before my time.
Mm-hmm.
Brian Gaynor, I don't know whether you know him. He's a lawyer. He's very involved in Chikochi, and he obviously was present. He told me a few things, but he was present when Kobun and Steve were together in his house or something. The only thing I know, and it was, when Kobun once gave a lecture in Pureg.
Yeah.
And actually, that was when those digital movies came out, or the cameras came out, and I purchased one. And for about a year, I filmed everything I did. I had the camera with me, and I filmed everything. And so I filmed Kobun's lectures at Pureg.
Yeah.
And out of those 7 days, 5 had no sound, but 2 had sound, and the one of them that had sound, it happened, it was the first day lecture, and he just came over from America, and he told the story that before he left, he met an old person who was dying, and how, he held his feet and so forth. And then later he learned that while they were in the air, that person actually passed on. Well, talked about that for about half an hour, and then it turns out that the way he met that person it turns out that was Steve Jobs' stepfather, or what do you call it? Not stepfather, father, adapted. He was adapted. Wasn't he a child that got adapted by an orphan?
Oh, that's right. Now, yeah,
So
I do know that. That was his, it was his father.
Mm-hmm. So, and then only because of that did he go into talking about how he met Steve Jobs. That's the only time I ever heard him talking about Steve Jobs. Kobun was not a name dropper, as you know.
Yeah, yeah, no kidding.
No. And so he talked about, how his wife was very pregnant, and at midnight she came and said, "There's a crazy person outside the door." And then he went out, and there was this young man with long hair and short, barefooted, and he said the person did look crazy, but he needed some help. And so they went into a bar, and he describes exactly what bar and what they drank, and that sequence actually got into one of the movies they made on Steve Jobs.
Mm-hmm.
This fourth lecture, I got $5,000 for it, which I donated to the kids. So that's Katrine to help bring up the kids.
Very nice.
And he talks about it. And then he talks about later how Steve always wanted to be ordained, and he didn't want to ordain him, and so forth, and how he, said, "I'm enlightened," and Kobun said, "Well, show it, prove it to me." And then he brought, a week later, he came and he brought this thing that looked like a wrapped up chocolate in silver paper, but that was sort of, I guess, a piece of his computer. And so he talks for 10 minutes about his life.
Yeah.
That's the only time I knew anything about it.
Oh, I was very curious to know. That's very interesting. I've transcribed that incidentally and have it on Cuke.com. And yeah, I didn't trust the transcription I read, so I did it. I downloaded that.
Okay.
Thank you very much for taking that. That was great.
You are welcome. Thank you very much for having the interest.
Yeah. I want to go back to the animal rights thing. Or what do you call it? I mean, I always feel funny saying animal rights, but
yeah,
I don't know what else.
I'm not a friend of rights either. I'm not a friend of rights. Rights is something you need. It makes sense for the UN to talk about human rights, and and then we say we can enforce that. But where in the universe are you going to, ask for your rights? I don't. I'm not so comfortable with the name of rights either. But that's what it is. Animal rights. That's what they call it.
Yeah. Why don't you? I mean, you've told me some pretty interesting stuff about that, about the man you worked with there, and how you had some sort of legal process going on that got to the Swiss Supreme Court, if I'm right. You told me that he and maybe you had death threats from big farmers. And can you tell us a little bit of the nuts and bolts of that?
Well, yes, I did work with several people, but Erwin is probably the guy you referred to in Switzerland here, very feisty and he's still at it. We're good friends, but he's impossible, of course, and he cannot
That's what
work
I heard.
with
Yeah, you said
you can only do that kind of work if you're a little bit determined. And
what's his name again? What's his name?
Irving Kessler, and he's the founder and president of the Association Against Animals Factory, Verein gegen Tierfabriken.
Oh, that's a good name.
Yeah. And we started a chapter in Austria. I was the president in there, and he was the vice president, and he was the president in Switzerland. I was the vice president in Switzerland. And so we started out with checking all the agricultural schools, because a lot of the schools actually taught and had installations that were actually already in conflict with law. I mean, the crates were too small, and so that went pretty quick. We checked out all the agricultural schools in Switzerland, and then as the next, we went to the monasteries, because the monasteries traditionally, had land and had, when in the 60s and 70s, when this intensive farming was pushed. They had the money to install it, and now they were stuck with these not so pleasant. They were mostly not happy with what they had, but they were stuck with it in some ways. So we attacked these big monasteries and got quite a bit of mileage out of it. Probably most mileage got out of the Duke of Liechtenstein, who had over 10,000 pigs in his huge land holdings in Austria. And the kind of pig holding that he had in Austria was illegal in Switzerland, and Liechtenstein has adapted the laws of Switzerland. So legally in Liechtenstein, his own factory in Austria was illegal. So we got a lot of mileage out of that, and we did quite a few interesting things, fun things. On his 50th birthday, I had a little remote helicopter fly over his castle and drop leaflets where he was, in a very friendly voice, reminding him of his, responsibility as a duke to his pigs. Anyway, we did a few. He sold it ultimately, but of course it still goes on. But and then the Circus Knie, the national circus in Switzerland, who still had elephants. I built a big elephant, life-size elephant, and put it on the truck and followed around the tour that the Knie goes through Switzerland with his huge tent, with the elephants. And we also went with our elephants and put up a stall in front of the entry and gave out leaflets and showed films and how they break in elephants and so forth. So, yeah, I put myself in a pig cage. They call these what they call it in Kastenstand in German. Most pigs are kept in these crates, body-size crates.
Right.
And so I put myself into one of those crates for a week and put it up on a truck, on a VW bus, and put it on the main plaza in Zurich, and stayed in there for a week. And,
wait. When you say you stayed in that crate for a week,
yeah, I went out for pooing, pooing, toilet. I went down, but everything else I stayed in there. Very nice. And
did you eat in there?
Yeah. Because there's people that were around also to protect me. But they were feeding me and
but you didn't bring food.
No.
That's great. Wow. Wow.
One of the moving parts was, for instance, also in the Kremsmünster is a big old, very prestigious monastery in Austria, and for a whole year they have a big 1,000 pigs. Every Sunday before Mass, I would drive there. It's about an hour from Hinterkauf, and hand out leaflets to the people who go to Mass. And then the stable is about 3 kilometers from the monastery. And then we did, like the Tibetans do, full prostrations. We covered the distance between the stable and the monastery. We did about 40 of us did full prostrations and then going through the village there, and that did it. They closed down the place. But it was a rainy day. It was really a spiritual experience. It was a rainy day. I've never done that before. It took 2 or 3 hours, and at the end we lay there in front of the entrance in the mud, and just people going to church had to step over us. That was strong.
Wow. Good for you. That is wonderful. I remember your rescue pigs. You had a really big one that was very sweet, and it was brown and hairy. And you had a very small one.
Yeah.
I can't remember how many. You didn't have a zillion. You had a few, like 3 or 4.
Yeah. No, 7.
7? Oh my gosh.
But they, one after the other died. Schwester Theresia, the Franciscan nun who takes care of them.
Yeah, I remember her.
She's still up there, and it's now an old people home or an old animal home because they all get old. So we just had to put to sleep the big Anton was his name. He was by far the oldest pig in Switzerland, if not in Europe, of that type. These are these hybrid pigs that are used for producing meat. They're so hybrid that they don't really get old anymore. They have joints problems, and but ours became 14 years old, which is very, very old. And so we just put him to sleep about 3 months ago, and we put Nandi to sleep, which was a big bull who also was 16 years with us. He jumped out of the window of a slaughterhouse, made big headlines in the television and everywhere, and we took him in, and he was here for 16 years, and we just put him to sleep too, because he couldn't get up anymore and so forth.
Now, what about you saying you got? Am I right? I remember you saying something about you got to the Supreme Court in Switzerland.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to show in paid advertising in Swiss television.
Yeah.
Where it showed pigs are intelligent, social, and active animals, and you see young pigs jumping around and running and with the mother, and the mother building a nest and so forth. About 40 seconds of that, and then just about the last 5 or 8 seconds, you saw like pigs in crates, in a big pig factory, and then at the end, a very lovely young lady, my then girlfriend, holds a little pig in her hands and says, "For your health, for the environment, and for the animals, eat vegetarian today."
Oh, wow.
So it was a paid advertise, and the Swiss television refused to show it under the pressure of the lobby. And we took it all the way through court, and the Swiss federal court held it up. Said, yes, it's a political advertising, and we do not allow that. And then we took it to the European Court in Den Haag, and it took about 10 years. But we ended up, Switzerland had to pay us 30,000 francs.
Wow.
Had to show that slip for 4 times at best sending times for free. So that was a little success in there. At the very same time, there, the the big buses in Lucerne, they gave free for advertising. So you could rent the whole bus and paint it over. You had to submit what you was going to paint and so forth. So I rented the bus. I said, I take one. And it was all clear. It was good. And I said exactly what I wanted to have written on it. I said, I want to have it on it. In the canton of Lucerne, more pigs than humans live. Why do we never see them? That was the sentence I wanted to have on it. And they said, okay, and you have to. And I started out, with a graphic designer, how to make that. And then the lobby again, the long arm of the lobby, they said, we can't do it. So we took that again to court, all the way up to federal court. I said, this is an objective fact. In Switzerland, in Canton Lucerne, live about 440,000 pigs and about 330,000 humans. The body of there is about the same size. Why do we never see a pig? This is an objective, not unfriendly or not, aggressive or not. Why can I not say that? Why can I not ask that question? So these are things that, we do.
So what was the result of?
Well, again, all the way up to the federal court, they upheld the decisions of the lower courts. We brought it to Brussels for the Den Haag and there only about 5% of the cases get even evaluated. They're so understaffed and so many, and it never got to anywhere.
Oh, well, hey, good try. That's great. That's great. Well, did you did the graphic work on it?
Yeah, on the so and then when the federal court turned us down, I just organized a little group of vehicles, one 40-ton truck, that was our sort of biggest one, but we were about 40 vehicles. And for 3 days, I just toured the canton of Lucerne with this big question, this slogan everywhere in Canton.
Oh, okay.
Lucerne.
So you did use it.
Oh yes, we did it for 3 days, and just went to all the big places, and yeah.
Now wait a minute. You said you had 40 trucks.
40 vehicles, small and big. The biggest was a 40-ton truck, but then all kinds of other vehicles and private vehicles, and everybody had big cardboard pigs, and we were sort of a honking parade that went through Lucerne for 3 days.
Now, did the biggest truck have that message on the side?
Yes. What we actually originally wanted to have on those buses, on the public buses.
That's good. That's good. That's movie quality, Vanja. Hey, your life is movie quality. I mean, look at let's tell us about what do you call it? Paragliding or hang gliding that you've done?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You've told me some really frightening stories, man.
If it comes to frightening stories, probably it's the balloon story that was sort of scary. That's a long time ago. I was not even 20. I was 19 or something, building a balloon and trying to fly myself, and my father interfering and then throwing the whole thing, sending up into the air. A few years later, in California, the guy had the exact same idea, but he took sort of weather balloons and tied them together, and put a chair underneath it, and went up. And he calculated, I undercalculated, and he overcalculated. So he went up like a
now who's he? Who's he?
That guy in California. He wrote about it, and he went up about I think 12 or 14,000
Yeah, I remember
meters.
that in L.A.
Freezing. Huh? Yeah, freezing.
He got
up there and then
into
coming down.
airspace that
Exactly.
that they had jets, going up to check about what this object was.
Mm-hmm. Well, he survived. He only broke a leg or something, and wrote a book. He wrote about it. I read all that. Changed his life. It was an experience.
Now,
but
did you do that?
No, I did basically the same thing. I took plastic bags, so long tubes, about 80 meters long tubes, and I filled them with what do you call it? That
helium?
Gas that
helium?
No, helium is too expensive.
Hydrogen.
What we used it's explosive actually because it's much cheaper.
Hydrogen?
It's not hydrogen. It's Wasserstoff. It's
I don't know what that would be.
Yeah. Anyway, if it's mixed with air, it becomes highly explosive. And we tied about 15 of those together and tied a chair underneath it, And I was sitting on the chair, and but it didn't quite lift me, or not quite enough. So I threw away all the gravel I had with me, the sand. I threw away the parachute that I had with me. I'd never done a parachute before. So I was just really sitting there in the chair in short pants, and it lifted me about 30 yards or so. And I have pictures of it, a huge thing. And then we decided we need more gas to have a better lift. And at that point, my father came onto the scene, and he was sure that he saved my life by cutting off the whole thing. It went up into the air then without me.
Oh, you mean your father went and cut the cord so that the whole thing just went?
Exactly.
And where was this in Switzerland?
Yeah, in Lucerne, right next to the factory, or not far from the factory.
Oh, wow. And you said you were about 19 or something?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But the guy in L.A. was way after that, huh?
Yeah, it was about 10 years later.
Yeah. I remember that.
Yeah.
All right, well that's cool. But what's this thing you do? Hang gliding, or is it parasailing?
Yeah, I did all that a lot of, and I almost killed myself several times. And
hey, tell. I remember. Tell us exactly how you almost killed yourself.
Well, there are several stories of that, but the one that where I actually finished, that was the last time I flew, was I got sucked up into a cloud. They always tell you that's the last thing you want to do. Oh. If you go under a cloud, you get into a suck that sucks up the air with such a strength that you cannot come down.
Oh.
And that happened to me, and I was in there, and then I lost total control over and it was not a hang glider, but a parachute. What do you call those?
Paraglider.
Paraglider with no stable things in it, and the thing would collapse, and I would fall down, and then it'd open again, and I would be drawn up, and that went on for a while. And I tried to get down, so that was an unpleasant experience. And finally, I was thrown against a wall way up in the mountains and I survived, obviously. No bigger. I went into the hospital, and then they sewed me up again, but no bigger, no major problems. But it was unpleasant enough that since then that was my last.
Wow.
Last experience with that.
Now, Paul Disco told me about going there and you getting him to do maybe hang gliding.
Yes.
And he said it was absolutely terrifying. And he went, up into the air, and then he went smashing down into all these bushes and stuff. You remember that?
I certainly do. And obviously, flying is potentially a dangerous thing.
Uh-huh. So, hey, since we're on Paul Disco, um, he was in charge of building your fantastic Zindo up there in Felsentor. And, and but before we get into that, Felsentor is that's the name of the big rock or something, right? The big
Right,
stone there.
right, right.
Oh, it's
Felsentor literally
beautiful.
means Felsentor. Felsentor literally means rock skate.
Yeah, and
And
there's
that's
these
what it is.
giant boulders, like
Yeah,
like I don't know how big, like 50 meters or something.
yeah. And,
And
and and you have to go through it to come to the place.
right, you have to go under it, and it's a beautiful gate. And then the
Yeah.
hotel you bought to create the practice center there, my understanding is that because I've talked to people in the area, and maybe you told me some things, but that it is a hotel that Queen Victoria would stay in on her way up to the top of the mountain.
Yes, yes, that's true. And Mark Twain and a lot of people, Hermann Hesse, the Rigi was a sort of one of the places that the British discovered when they discovered the mountains and nature and so forth. And
Uh-huh.
the Rigi was one of the places that they walked up and looked at sunsets and sunrises, and they built big hotels up there. And,
Oh, it's
Felsentor was
gorgeous.
right halfway, was in the middle. That's where they would stop or stay overnight. And,
Yeah.
that's on halfway to the top. Yeah. Paul Disco, by the way, did not only do that thing, though he also was essentially involved in the Send Austria Pureg,
Oh,
where he lived with Gloria for 9 months.
is that right? Is that
Yeah,
right?
that was sort of his first stepping stone out of Zen Center was coming to Europe to meet to Austria.
Oh, wow. Wow.
And he also did the same though in Reckenbühlstraße, the one in Lucerne.
Well, but what's his name? The Japanese carpenter.
Yeah, Sakaguchi or
Yeah, Sakaguchi,
uh-huh.
Hiroshi
Hiroshi, exactly. Yeah.
Very, very fine. Does very fine cabinet work. Paul respects him
It's,
greatly. He's a
yes,
madman too.
Yeah, absolutely. I would have stories about him.
Oh yeah, he lived in and I know his wife Anne. Uh, I was living in Sebastopol, and Hiroshi and Anne were living like over in Occidental, and he is the worst uh, behaved drinker Japanese
Huh,
I ever met.
huh.
Every bar in the area had kicked him out and wouldn't let him come, and he would just
Oh,
totally lose it when he drank.
yeah.
And but he was great at this beautiful work. And if I remember right, you tell me wrong, that he did all this great work for you, and you just paid him in cash. And then he disappeared. Nobody knew what had happened to him. He was
I know,
discovered
I know, I know,
later, penniless, right?
I know. That's true. And then they would call me up and say we have this man here and he invites the whole restaurant bar in somewhere in Amsterdam, and he spent thousands of dollars in one night just being.
Yeah. Wow. Wow. Uh, so yeah, and that the Zendo in your home there is beautiful.
It's
Uh,
very beautiful.
but of course the Zendo at Felsentor uh, up uphill a tiny bit, almost adjoining the hotel, is wonderful. It's 2-story. There's living quarters above uh, for maybe 9 rooms. How many?
Are you talking about the hotel or the Sendo?
The Zendo.
Well, the Sendo has come in, and then there's two bathrooms left and right for men and women, and behind that there are sort of communal rooms where people can sleep. 5 or 6 people can sleep. Two sides. Usually it's like a dorm for men and a dorm for women.
Yeah.
And then then the middle floor is the Zendo, and on top is the Dokusan room.
And the Zendo is gorgeous, and it's just like traditional Japanese Zendo, extremely fine work. Doesn't it have a a walking area going around it?
Yes, the whole thing has around the Zendo. You can do kinhin outside under the roof and on the balcony.
Maybe that's called a genkan. That's more like an entryway. Anyway.
Engawa, I have in my mind.
Hey, there you go. There you go. I think that sounds good. Well, so are there any details you can tell us about building that?
The building took about it took 2 years to renovate the old hotel, and it took 2 years to put up the Zendo, which was built in Oakland in the joinery structure, and then they shipped it over in containers, 3 containers. And then but that has nothing to do with, because everything has to be flown up there. You cannot drive there. It's a remote place. So we had to fly up the whole thing then, and then put it together up there.
You mean fly it in helicopters?
Yeah, flying the helicopter, flying all the material up to. It was built in Oakland, and it was shipped.
Wow.
But in some ways, it was not more expensive. That not only in Switzerland nobody had the skills to do that, but the labor is cheaper in America. So to build it there was not and one container is like $5,000 or $7,000. We had 3 containers, so that's not a big expense. It just takes 2 or 3 months to send it over, and then it was here. And once it was here, you have to fly up everything anyway there because that's the only way you can bring stuff up.
How many flights?
Oh, I don't know.
You know what? I met the German contractor by coincidence.
Oh, yeah?
And he didn't speak any English, and I always study language, and that's when I was at staying at Johanneshof for 4 months. And Balthasar Lomar, you know him.
Yeah.
He came and picked me up, and I was sitting talking by the cog train, you call it, that comes up there.
Yes,
with this man, and I said, Balthasar, this is so and so. I said, I think he just told me that there were 500 helicopter trips.
Very possible.
To bring everything up there. It's incredible.
Very possible.
And Balthasar said, yeah, that's right. Anyway, it's a magnificent building. They both are. And is the community there healthy and things going well?
Yes. And we are, moving back to normalcy. Last Sunday we had our first open meditation again, and this Monday we started our first course again. So we moving back into normal.
Wow.
Listen, David. I'm getting into. I have to move here.
Yeah.
Because as I said, we have been on the phone for a while, and I have to go to my brother, which is in Sursee, and I have to close here now. I think very interesting, and we can, if you want to have more, we can do more. But right now I have to sort of close it up.
Yeah, that was great. That was wonderful. The only thing I didn't get to, at least in my notes right here, was Brother David. But
Well, let's do it another time.
Yeah, that was really wonderful. See, it was really interesting, really fascinating. Thanks a lot, and keep up the good work.
Thank you. Same to you. Fun to talk to you.
Yeah, take care.
Please, I will tell Lorley that you wanted to talk to her. She remembers you and she liked you.
Oh, yeah, tell her hello. Tell her I remember her fondly.
Okay. Talk to you later.
Yeah, take care.
Bye-bye.
Thanks a lot. Bye-bye. So, thank you very much, Hans Vanja Palmers, and keep up the good work. So this has been another Cuke Audio Phone Chat. I'm your host, DC, suggesting that if you're of such a mind, that you mosey over to the homepage of Cuke.com, and there's a link near the top or near the bottom to the donate page of Cuke.com, CUKE.com. There's also one of those links on the Cuke Audio Podbean page, and that will take you to the donate page, and it's very easy there to find out how to send a check or to make a contribution through PayPal or become a PayPal subscriber for as little as $1 a month. And we love our $1 a monthers. And we depend on donations to keep going. It's easy and it's lots of fun. So signing off with Doggett Bandita and Feline Cuchita, but without Dearest Katrinka, from Sleepy Sanur, and wishing you and yours and all of us a grand awakening.